Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have confirmation that we are live streaming. You may call the meeting to order.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So we're ready? We're ready to go?
We're ready to roll.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Councillor. Councillor, I see we have quorum, SLT, and the viewing public. Welcome to the meeting. 5:47 on March the 1st. I see we have quorum, so I call it to order. Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that the agenda for the March 1st, 2021 regular meeting of Council be adopted.
Council Wink.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Just a point of correction. Under consent agenda 8.1, it talks about the public meeting of the Planning Act February 8th. I believe, according to the document behind it, it should be January 18th, 2021.
Thank you for that, Councillor. Clerk will make a note of that.
Thank you. I'm so noting that now.
Okay. Any other changes to the agenda? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Seeing no other discussion, I will start the vote with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That motion passes. That does bring you to the disclosure of pecuniary interest.
Thank you. Is there any council member that would like to disclose or has to disclose a pecuniary interest? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. I have now noted so. That does bring us to item 4.1.1, and this would be presentation by Fire Chief Mr. Bob Limburner.
Chief, you have the floor.
Thank you. Through Mr. Mayor, Council, senior leadership, and the members of the viewing public. Just a few numbers here to keep you current in the COVID situation. As of today, Pelham has a total number of cases of 286, of which 9 are active. Across the region, we've had a total case count of 8,597. We had 14 new ones today. Total resolved cases, 7,958. Total deaths, 369. Across the province, we're at 301,839 total cases, 284,283 resolved, with 6,986 deaths. Provincially, the hospital admissions are at 659. Of those, 280 in ICU, and from those, 175 are on ventilators. Across the country, we're at 868,115 total cases, 815,658 resolved, with a total death count of 22,007. Across the region, our case doubling time is at 348 days. Reproduction rates at 1.0, positivity rates at 1.1. Our public health department is currently working with 14 active outbreaks, and they have resolved 223. Across the infection spread, close contact is 59.6, unknown is 26.9, community spread 10.5, and travel 3.0. To date, vaccines administered, Niagara Public Health has administered 10,652. Niagara Health has administered 12,401. The province has administered 704,695. And across the country, we're at 1.9 million, just over 1.9 million. If we look at our provincial indicators, Niagara is cases hospitalized is in green. New cases unknown spread is in red. Reproduction rates green. Positivity rates yellow. New cases per 100,000 population is at yellow. Our daily average new cases is at green. As of today, Niagara has moved into the red with some additional 22 orders placed on us by public health. Our MCC is now open with some restrictions, and the province has announced March 15th is their target date for starting online vaccination appointments for residents 80 years and older. And that's the end of my report. If you have any questions.
Thank you for that report, Chief. Any questions from anyone on council? Not seeing any. I have one for you, Chief. If our numbers stay or possibly even get better, I know there's a question of the variants possibly increasing them, but if our numbers continue the same and, like I say, actually lower, how long are we mandated to stay in the red before we can move up a code?
Under the old system, the province had used a 28-day cycle. So if they put you into a color, you couldn't go down for at least 28 days. So you can go up at any moment. But now they're looking at it on a weekly basis. So we could see, I doubt very much that we'll move next week, but given a 2-week period, and if numbers continue to trend down and our neighbors continue to trend down, because our neighbors play a big factor on Niagara. So we might look really good, but if our neighbors are performing very poorly, we need to be shut down or we need to be restrictive just to keep the people from coming here. So it's kind of a gray area when it comes to that. But I would think our next change might occur in another couple weeks.
Okay, thank you for that, Chief. And obviously, just because we're in red, we still have to be very careful. Keep the hands sanitized and be careful of social distancing and always have the mask on when in a public spot. Thank you for that, Chief. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. I would call the vote starting with Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
That motion carries.
Thank you.
That does bring us to the next item on the agenda, and that would be the presentation from the Chief Administrative Officer, Mr. David Cribbs.
Mr. CAO, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, Council. I have 3 items I'd like to report to you with respect to our overall COVID dealings and strategy. First is, and the happy part, is we're just happy to announce that the MCC is open. Today we had people, chasing a puck around the ice, and there were people on the ice skating. And I was told by a number of people it was sort of beautiful to see, and we had people wandering the track. At least those 2 things. Ms. Van Ravensway can provide you with more detail beyond that. But members of the community were back in the MCC today, and we've had a lot of phone calls, and I know arrangements are being made for yet more activities. So it's a good day today in Pelham. That's the key piece. Secondly, I can tell you your EOC or Emergency Operations Center and team and control group are working on a couple of pieces. We're in very early exploratory talks with our very good partners at the library to look and try to see what and how we might assist our residents with ultimately with registration to receive the COVID vaccine. It's there's some complication to the process, and other areas of Ontario have been getting more of the vaccine and are further ahead than we are. And a number of, certainly, in fact, libraries tend to take the lead, have been helping residents, particularly the older ones, get themselves registered because it's a technologically involved process. So we're having some exploratory talks, and hopefully we'll be able to put something together to assist residents of the town of Pelham. So that's something positive we're working towards and a service we want to offer. And then beyond that, the control group are in the initial stages of looking towards a rollout plan for some sort of greater amount of return to work and when that might happen later on into the year, and sort of planning for that eventuality. So those are the things we have in mind with respect to COVID. Subject to questions, that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. CAO. Any questions on this report? Councillor Stewart?
Yes, thank you. I'm not sure if this is for Mr. Cribbs or Mr. Limburner, but I'm wondering if we have a location planned for where shots will be administered in Pelham.
We do, but I'll defer to the chief. He was actually involved directly in the tours and the site selection process, whereas I'm really just aware of the outcome.
Mr. Chief?
Yeah, through Mr. Mayor. Yes, we have been in contact with public health. We've met them with a number of times. They're working on establishing some sites and coming up with agreements. And at this time, it's confidential. Public health has asked us not to disclose any locations or any talks at this point. But hopefully we'll have something in the next week or so.
I'm really glad I deferred that.
Thank you. Thank you for the non-information.
Thank you for the question, Councillor. Any other questions to the CAO? Councillor Olson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CAO, have we started the process of registering or evaluating the patios, the restaurant patios and that type of thing?
Well, we do have a report that addresses that topic further on the agenda. In essence, the service offered by the town, we're recommending to you be the same as last year. No fees, expanded patios, and we typically send out a representative of both building and fire together, so you only have to have one inspection to deal with the sort of health and safety components. I hope that answers the question, sir.
Yes, thank you. I see it at 8.3.2.
Very good.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor. Any other questions? Not seeing any. Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I have a motion put forth by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Stewart. Be it resolved that Council receive the COVID-19 update presentation from D. Cribbs, Chief Administrative Officer, for information. We would start to call the vote with Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you. That motion carries. Councillor Hildebrandt. Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Oh, through you, Mr. Mayor, we are starting to bring in members from the Beautification Committee. We asked them to watch the live streaming at home so they know when their agenda item is. So that's likely why we're hearing some playbacks. The members were watching the live stream. I apologize for that.
So they know when their agenda.
I would just ask for those to mute themselves and to please exit out of your live stream. Mr. Mayor, thank you. This does bring us to our registered delegations from the Beautification Committee. We do have Ms. Jennifer Pilzecker. She will be presenting on behalf of the committee. She is being accompanied by a few other members of the committee to answer questions of council if they do have any. We are just sharing our screen with their presentation. I would like to remind the presenter that delegates are limited to 10 minutes. In that regard, I will have a timer. And at the 8 minutes moment, I will ring a bell. That will give you a 2-minute warning. And then at 10 minutes, I will ring the bell again. And that will signify that your time is up. So Ms. Polzetki, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, for taking the time today to hear from the Beautification Committee. We do try to come to Council once a year to give you an update on what we've been up to and also discuss some of our priorities into the coming year. So thank you, Sarah, for all your help with this PowerPoint and for getting us to slide number 2. So as you can see, we are a group of volunteer residents, the committee is, approved by Council to advise the Council on community beautification as defined in our terms of reference. And our terms of reference are available on the town website for anyone who is interested. Council would be familiar with them as council does set our terms of reference. The Beautification Committee strives to foster civic pride, environmental responsibility, and beautification through community involvement. And Sarah, if we could go into slide number 3, next slide. There we go. And we try to do all of this with a focus on enhancing green spaces in our community. Some examples of fostering civic pride would be our community beautification thank you recognition program. It's an initiative that promotes community involvement and enhancement of green spaces. And another one of these initiatives that our committee tackles every year now is the Holiday Greenery Initiative. Last year, we also did have an opportunity to help implement the community garden bed competition. And those were the things that kept us busy in 2020 amongst some other initiatives. So moving on to some other aspects of our terms of reference, they would include initiating tidiness efforts in the community, I guess promoting any kind of initiatives on environmental stewardship, providing education on that. And we do work with the Department of Public Works to assist in community landscaping. And we are currently offering input on a gateway initiative at Highway 20 and Rice Road, and also associated landscape elements around the stormwater management pond there. So our committee does strive to promote the benefits of environmental stewardship through education initiatives and opportunity in the community. That's something we hope that council and the community will remember and reach out to us if they think they know of any opportunities for us to become more active and encourage the community in the way that it fits with our terms of reference. So if we can go on to slide 4, you're going to see the goals and priorities remain unchanged since our last presentation to council. The committee's goals and priorities include consulting with the community to develop beautification priorities. We actively did this prior to the pandemic with our supper market surveys. Examining of best practices is also very important to us. So for 2021, we were actively engaged in contacting nearby municipalities to inquire about legacy programs. Those are the programs that you would see to honor somebody maybe with a bench or tree. You may also know them as memorial programs. And council did ask us to look into these initiatives and report back. So we will be working on that this year and hope to have our advice to council shortly. So we're also working on developing beautification priorities based on those examinations of best practices. So that example was just focusing on legacy projects, but we're also looking at broader examples as well. So we completed a review of our goals and priorities in late 2020, and so far we're doing quite well. We do set goals and priorities as a committee, and we try to accomplish those in the period of our term, which lasts to 2022. So if we can go on to the next slide, please. Now I talked about, and you see some photos here. You can see some images of the community garden bed competition, some of the participants and the garden bed sponsored. And then you see the holiday elves as well, getting ready to hang the holiday greenery that you would have seen throughout the town on a lot of the poles, benches, and just throughout the community in general. So if we can go on the next slide. Thank you. And so in I'm gonna just look through my notes here. I'm trying to stick to what I have written because I am representing the remarkable members of this committee, and I don't want to go off script here. So in 2020, our goals and priorities were accomplished through the Thank You Card Initiative, which I've already explained, the community engagement through the community garden bed competition, the discussion and endorsement of a collaborative Font Hill Gateway feature with Public Works, community engagement through the Holiday Greenery Initiative. And that brings us to our committee goals. And they can be summarized by what you see on the screen right now, and that is community consultation, examination of best practices, and development of beautification priorities based on community input. If we go on to the next slide, additional committee goals would be to plan and advise council, which is why we're here today, to just give you our report, and to assess the effectiveness of what we've been implementing. And this is why we do that annual review of our goals and priorities. It does give us a good idea of whether or not we're on track or if we're getting sidetracked. So if we can go on to the next slide. So we have here the opportunities we just discussed in 2020, and some of them go into 2021. The PRIP grant is the Public Realm Investment Program grant, which is provided through the region. It is a cost matching grant, and we are working with Public Works to just offer some input on some of the aspects of what that grant will be accomplishing in our community. Then, of course, we have the Community Garden Bed Competition and the Community Beautification Thank You Initiative. And next to all these, you're going to see our requested budget for the year. If we can go on to the next slide, please. So to talk a little bit more about the Public Realm Investment Program grant through Niagara Region, we have endorsed the Community Gateway feature located at Rice Road and Highway 20. And this is the feature that we currently are offering input into the planning stages of. And we look forward to working with Public Works and the region further to develop this new gateway feature. All right, can we have the next slide, please? And we are here today to ask council for an annual budget of $250 for the printing of our committee's Thank You Card Initiative. And this initiative, you may read about in the local newspapers, showcases some of the efforts of residents throughout the town and businesses. We live in a remarkable town, and it is very good to recognize the people that go out of their way to beautify it and make it a special place for us to live. So that is what that budget request is for. And if we could have the next slide. And here are some images just of some of those who were recognized in 2020 for their efforts. We have the Font Hill Inn, the Pelham Garden Club, and of course the fire station out on Cream Street, who always go to the trouble to flood a field and make a community skating rink for all those kind of out toward North Pelham and everyone in the community. It's really appreciated. So these are just some examples of people or businesses we would thank for their efforts in the community. And next slide, please. All right, so we talked about the opportunities, and there are some opportunities identified by council for the 2021-2022 year. And there was a motion passed by council December 7th, 2020, that the Beautification Committee engage with the public about legacy projects for funding within the town. Now, because of the pandemic, we haven't proactively reached out to the public yet. We are engaging with local municipalities to find out what they currently do, how much those projects currently cost, And then we hope as the vaccine
her a
rolls
little
out, we'll have a greater opportunity to interact with people in the community and find out what they would really like to see on that. And of course, we'll be reporting back to council on our findings. Now, opportunities identified by our committee for 2021 would be working with the region to beautify Highway 20 and Pelham streets, and also on examining beautification best practices in other communities so we can better advise council and be useful to you. If we could have the next slide, please. And that's it. So, and Sarah, thank you, and the clerk's office, thank you so much for your help with that presentation. And hopefully it wasn't too tedious to listen to for council. Again, we really appreciate your time today. And if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
Okay, Jennifer, thank you very much for that presentation. As the council representative on your committee, I'm always impressed with the ideas and the thoughtfulness that your team puts into your committee, into your committee work. Those pictures that you showed, it shows that you guys are indeed a very active group in the community. Putting up that greenery at Christmas time can be a very cold job. And I know you had lots of helpers out there. And again, you guys ended up doing a great job on that project, as all others. Again, thank you very much for your presentation and the committee for the work. I'll open this up to council now. Any questions or comments from any members of council? Not seeing any. Jen, I guess it was a great presentation, and there was no questions on it. Thank you again for that presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, council. Have a good meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrandt, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Be it resolved that council receive the 2020 Beautification Committee update report for information and that council approve the requested annual budget of $250. I would ask if there's any discussion by council.
Not seeing any. Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will start the vote with Councillor Olson. Councillor Olson?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Councillor Wink?
Yes.
Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt?
Yes.
Councillor Kaur?
Yes.
Mayor Junkin?
Yes.
That motion carries. Mr. Mayor, that brings us to our next item of business, which is the adoption of minutes. And I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that the following minutes be adopted as printed, circulated, and read for item C-03/2021, regular council minutes, February 16th, 2021. If you'd like to call for any errors or omissions.
Yes. After viewing the minutes, is there any errors or omissions noticed by anyone on council? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I will start the vote with Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink?
Yes.
Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt?
Yes.
Councillor Kaur?
Yes.
Councillor Olson?
Yes.
Mayor Junkin?
Yes.
And that motion carries. Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to item number 7 on the agenda. This is the lift consent items for separate consideration. As council is aware, councilors may lift an item from the consent agenda if they wish to amend the resolution presented. If councilors simply have comments on an item, they do not require to lift the item. Members of council, if there's any items that you wish to lift, please do advise.
Okay. Any member, council wish to lift a member or a consent agenda? Not seeing so, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Be it resolved that the consent agenda items as listed on the March 1st, 2021 council agenda be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved as applicable. Starting for the vote on this motion, we'll begin with Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes, but I think Councillor Hildebrand has a question.
My apologies, I did not
Oh.
realize that there was any discussion going on. My
Council-
apologies.
Councillor Hildebrand then?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I have discussion on several items. In fact, a total of 3 items on the agenda. I'm not lifting them, but I want to discuss those 3 items. They're 8.3.3, 8.3.4, and 8.5.5.
Yes, and we can, yes, so as you say, you don't have to lift them, so we will be discussing them at the end of this motion. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. I do have 8.3.3 up. If you'd like to go ahead and make your comments, Councillor Hildebrand.
Go ahead, Councillor.
First of all, I want to thank the Director of Planning for this report because I've been after that report for a long time. Now, saying that, I spent a lot of time reviewing the full report because I'm hoping as we go along, we continue to address the report. So I have a lot of comments to make. The first question I have with regards to this is 31 B1.7.3.1 talks about general development objectives. And it talks about 15 persons and jobs combined per hectare. I can understand how you analyze to get the number of people per hectare. I think that's a calculable number. But what I don't know is how are you able to calculate the number of jobs per hectare?
Madame Planning?
Respond to that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, as the councillor indicated, we did have some discussion about this afternoon, and I indicated to him that the calculation for number of jobs per hectare is a difficult one to measure and to determine. We've had a number of discussions with the region about that and how to do it. There isn't a definitive calculation per se that they have, and that's being agreed to with the province in terms of measuring it. You know, for example, you know, you could have a large warehouse that takes up a large tract of land and not actually have very many employees, whereas you could have some other type of business that's much smaller in scale and size, but has more employees on a per hectare basis than the warehouse would. So it's always difficult to find that measurement and how to measure it. Other types of businesses that are, that exist in the community and are high employers are things like long-term care or retirement residences, and they don't actually count as employment areas because they're residential uses. So we have this conundrum, and to make a long story a little bit shorter is that we don't have a definitive way of calculating employment numbers. The region does do an employment survey on an annual basis, and they try to update their employment numbers, but unfortunately we do not have a definitive way to calculate employment.
Councillor Hildebrand? Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry about that, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Director. Are you finished?
Well, just in terms of my discussion with the councillor, certainly calculating, population by different residential types of dwellings, that's a little bit more easily understood. And there are defined calculations for that, and it's based on Census Canada data.
Okay, thank you, Madam Director. Councillor Hildebrand.
If I may continue, Your Worship. The other more interesting number becomes intensification, because it says we should have an intensification target of 15%. In the report, you've got a total planned and approved percentage of intensification at 25.3, but then you go on and continue with your report and say only 119 units are actually constructed, which gives you an intensification number of 8.5%. The question then is, can we use the higher number for our number? Because it isn't actually done, but it is the plan, because I don't think the town can control when development or when these developers are going to develop. So will the Director of Planning please comment on that as well?
Through you, Madam Director.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. And through you, as the councillor indicated, when we do the analysis with respect to intensification, which occurs in our built boundary areas, with what has been approved since the plan was prepared, we are achieving a infill or intensification target of 25.3%. So that is the target that we're meant to achieve. The 15% that's in the official plan and in the region's plan is the minimum target. We can exceed it. And then when you drill down further in terms of what's actually been built, we're not even achieving the 15%. We're considerably less at 8.5%. So there's the planned and theoretical intensification target in terms of what's being approved, and then there's what's actually happening on the ground. And so, you know, some of those approvals that were granted, perhaps they were speculative in nature, and you know, the developer or the applicant did them in terms of speculating on a development that's not going to happen for a considerable number of years. Also, there's other reasons why development takes much longer to come to fruition, from when it was approved to when it actually gets constructed. Development is very expensive to undertake. There's a lot of financing that has to be arranged, and so forth. And so development doesn't always happen immediately after it's been approved. But you can see from the list and the tables that are included in the report that there are a number of developments that were approved even a number of years ago that, you know, we're still waiting to see them being realized.
Councillor?
If I may continue. The question always is, how are we going to be evaluated? Are we evaluated based on what we're planned? And how is our plan going to reflect that? And I'll just provide my last two questions as we're going along. There's two other aspects to this, and one is the monitoring of housing, which talks about identifying the location and spatial distribution of the supply of vacant land designated residential and land within the official plan. And then we talk about phasing, and I know Eastbound Hill has a specificity with regards to difference in phasing. And I know these are complex issues. And how is the new official plan going to address all these? Is it going to be more specific and allow us some deviations, or is this just the way the government from Ontario gives you the rules, and that's how you have to report it?
To you, Madam Director.
So, Mr. Mayor, through you, certainly the provincial government, you know, establishes a target. And, you know, for example, the growth plan that was prepared in 2010, or pardon me, 2006, had an intensification target for Niagara for 40%. So the region is responsible for distribution of that 40% intensification target across the region, and 15% was allocated to the town of Pelham. The new growth plan that was approved by the provincial government in 2017 increased that intensification target to 50%. And we know that the region is looking at updating their official plan, and part of that process will be evaluating the intensification targets for every municipality. We can expect that Pelham's intensification target of 15% will be increased through the regional official plan, at which point in time we will be required to update our official plan, and then through the processes of doing detailed secondary plans, that's where we figure out the distribution of the housing units on our vacant land supply. So when East Fenwick secondary plan was developed, there was a very comprehensive analysis done with respect to the different types of housing, the density of those housing units and across the various neighborhoods in East Fonthill. And those are included in the appendix of our official plan that shows that distribution of housing. And so when we are looking at development plans in the East Fonthill neighborhood, we compare what's being proposed to what was included at the time that the secondary plan was developed and the distribution of housing to ensure that we're meeting those targets. And that's what we bring to you for approval. So we're confident we are meeting those targets. And I can indicate that when the work that we've done on the East Fenwick secondary plan, it will also include that same kind of distribution and spatial analysis of the various housing units throughout the East Fenwick area, so that we know, and then the developers will also know and have a clear path about how the lands are proposed to be developed and the distribution of the various types of units and densities throughout the area.
Thank you for that, Madame. Councillor Hildebrand?
Thank you. Thank you so much. We spent a lot of time this afternoon talking about this.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. So I know you have a couple other items you want to discuss, I believe. I'll first of all ask any other councillor, is any that has to discuss on this particular item? Councillor Hahn?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, to the Director of Planning. I'm just wondering, with regards to secondary dwelling units, has there been consideration for those? Because that would certainly change your density. And I know that still remains to be seen, and we still have to go through that process. However, that, when it comes to fruition, should most certainly change your density. But I also noticed that wasn't in the report. So will that be a consideration?
Madam Director?
So, Mr. Mayor, through you, you'll recall this was an item that was discussed during the public meeting when we had the public meeting on second dwelling units. Most jurisdictions do not count second dwelling units towards the density calculations because there is no really reasonable means of tracking them other than the building permit process. But oftentimes somebody will build a second dwelling unit and then a few years later, circumstances change and that second dwelling unit is no longer occupied. They've taken over the entire house, or, there's a new owner that's moved in and has reconverted the second dwelling unit away. So because second dwelling units are easier to change back and revert back and forth to back to a single dwelling, there is most jurisdictions do not include those in their intensification targets.
Councillor Hahn?
Yeah, further to that, if I might, and that is, I think probably, I'm going to guess that there's probably a factor there that because a lot of secondary dwelling units were not, shall we say, legal, and that people would just go ahead, build them, and so be it. And what we're looking to do, possibly in Pelham, of course, is to put together, policies so that folks would need to actually go through a process, and they would be what we would refer to as legal secondary dwelling units. So that may change the approach that we would take, because then there's more of a system to monitor those, and because it's something people are knowing they're able to do versus doing on the back route without anyone knowing, because people would be free to go down that route to that effect. Then you probably would have a way to measure that, and you'd have more people taking advantage of that. So I'm just thinking in the end, I guess, and this is kind of a yes or no answer, it's really up to the municipality then to decide whether or not we would want to use that calculation for secondary dwelling units towards our densification. It's not something that is mandated that we can't. It's a choice then, correct?
Well, Mr. Mayor, through you, sorry, what I can advise is, though, that it is guidance from the provincial government to not include them as the intensification target. So, I would have to look at that to just reflect back on the language to see whether or not it's guidance, how mandatory it is, and then report back to you.
Thank you.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As far as the second dwelling units go, I think there needs to be a distinction made between what is a granny flat, where the owner of the house would have access to it. You know, it would be a separate living space, but it would still be accessible from the person living there to the main house and from the main house to that. I think there needs to be a distinction made between that and what's truly a secondary dwelling unit, you know, as an apartment where, you know, it's landlord tenant and they just don't have the ability to walk in.
Any comment on that, Director of Planning?
Mr. Mayor, through you, certainly the second dwelling units can take a variety of forms, whether they're, as Councillor Stewart indicated, talked about a granny flat, a basement apartment, a new addition onto a house. Sometimes they're, you know, a garage conversion or an addition above a garage. They can take all sorts of different forms, but, you know, granny flat is certainly one of them. And depending on if that unit is, you know, separated as a separate unit, it's required to meet kind of building code and fire code requirements for separation and those kind of things, as opposed to, you know, a separate kind of bedroom and bed sitting area and maybe a bathroom for somebody else that, you know, they have what might be their own wing of a house or something like that. So those are two different kind of approaches, and that one wouldn't be a second dwelling unit. You just have somebody else living in your house, but maybe occupying a portion of the house exclusively for their own use.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Director. Councillor Stewart, any other comments on that?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, that was the distinction that I was trying to make, where that wouldn't be actually a secondary dwelling unit. It would be, you know, kind of a separated area within the house. What we're talking about, like a proper separate dwelling unit where you could just rent it out to somebody and they don't have access to your interior spaces.
Yep. Okay, thank you for those comments. Councillor Hildebrandt, I know you had wanted to discuss another item, but I am going to go on to see if another councillor has any of these consent agendas, and then we'll come back to you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wink, I see.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Not looking to lift an item, but maybe talk to 8.3.2, the outdoor restaurant patios. I thank staff for bringing this forward, and I think it's a great idea to be able to help our restaurants as much as possible through this until we get through all this pandemic. We do, as a town, have quite a large supply of picnic tables that I doubt that we would be utilizing throughout the rest of the pandemic, that it might be worthwhile that we direct staff to allow the restaurants to request picnic tables for their use, and we would provide them free of charge for this year. So just want to provide that direction to staff.
Okay. Let me ask the CAO to comment on that, please.
Well, both Mr. Marr and Ms. Weens are actually better positioned.
Oh. Okay.
They both live in this file where, so I would defer to them, but I do believe we have surplus picnic tables.
I will go to the Director of Planning then, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Yes, certainly the last summer we did make picnic tables available to some of the restaurants. They requested them and we made them available and provided them to them for their use. And the outdoor restaurant patio was seen as a very positive initiative for many of the restaurants that we have in Pelham, where they utilize part of their parking lot for patio space and allowed them to be able to offer food service outside. We anticipate that will be the same kind of limitations or restrictions in place this summer and this spring going forward, given where we are with the pandemic.
Thank you. One question before I go to Director of Public Works, to you, Director of Planning. Will there be let's say it ends up being a glorious spring, winter's back is broken, great weather from here on in, but whatever. Is there a time when they can begin to do outside dining?
Mr. Mayor, through you, in terms of using their parking lot, we don't have any restrictions on that. The outdoor sidewalk patios, the policy is from May to October, I believe. But you know, that could, if the weather turns really nice, I'm sure we're going to get interest sooner than that. But typically, that's kind of the opening or windows that we have with respect to the sidewalk patio use.
Okay, thank you for that. Director of Public Works, any comments to add to this debate?
To you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Public Works does, we do have picnic tables that are available that we could transport to businesses that would help them with their outdoor dining situations. We have those in stock.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Wink?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Thanks for those comments. I'm not sure if we need a direction or a motion to enhance this. You know, just direction to staff that we will make it available at no cost to the restaurants would be. Is that sufficient?
Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Wink, if you'd like, you could put forth a motion, be it resolved that council directs staff to provide picnic tables to local restaurants to be used for patios and outdoor eating at no cost. If you'd like to formalize that and have a seconder.
Is there a seconder for this motion? Councillor Kaur? Any debate on this motion? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. So for this motion, I would start the vote with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that would pass.
Thank you. Any other councillors, before I circle back to Councillor Hildebrandt, any other councillors? I'll see Councillor Olson.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the treasurer. I became aware of a set of grants called for the Municipalities for Climate Innovation Program, a 5-year $75 million program designed to encourage Canadian municipalities to better prepare for and adapt to the new realities of climate change, as well as reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The program is being delivered by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and funded by the Government of Canada. And reading through the qualifying notes, I think it's a worthwhile thing. Would you be able to review that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, I will.
Okay, thank you, Madam Treasurer. Anything else, Councillor Olson?
Oh, that's it, Your Honor, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other councillor? If not, Councillor Hahn.
Yes, through the mayor. So with 8.3.4, the grants update, I just wanted to better understand, I guess, if I could have further explanation with regards to the IT aspect, and if there could be a recap on that, please.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, with regards to the IT review, we're looking at obtaining a consultant for us to look at our current public service request system that we have for customer service. We are connected with a system that the region has, and what they would do is provide us with recommendation on how we can integrate with that system and provide the best service for our customers. and obtain the information that we need to do the work orders, and also to provide proper reporting on the request from the residents. And also looking at some of the other software systems that we do have that we want to enhance more for the public use. So for example, in the cemeteries, looking at the software system that would be, I think, easier to find names on the plots, and also some other systems such as the bylaws, that they would be easier to access them for the public on the web. So we're just looking at enhancing some of our current IT systems.
So further to that, then Treasurer, so enhancing. So our current PSR is an application. So this is, I guess, where my confusion came in. So enhancing what we already have with the existing provider through PSR, or moving to something that you said the region is using in place?
Yeah, no, through you, Mr. Mayor, no, it's looking at different options and more than likely moving away from what we have.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Hildebrand, you've got the floor again.
Thank you. I'd like to continue on with grants. On the grant information that we received report, it talks about number 2, Canada Healthy Communities Initiative highlights. And with it says it must fall within the 3 theme areas of safe, vibrant public spaces, improved mobility options, and digital solutions. And under that, we have the application for the Rotary Club Arches. One of the other presentations we've had twice now, I remember at council, and I've had personal representation from them, is the Seniors Advisory Committee. And their concern was, we've talked about parking at the MCC, but they've also talked about more seniors parking and more handicap parking, because both of those spots seem to be very limited. And I've been with my friend when we've had meetings over there who has a seniors parking ticket. And I believe because of our seniors population in the town, we have many people that have that senior parking sticker availability. And the number of spots when you count them is very limited. So I would have thought the grant would have applied for something to do with that instead of arches. Like, arches don't seem to be a improved mobility option, or in my view. That's just my comment. So I'm not sure how we chose the arches in that category.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, the municipality can only put one application, and the application that we're bringing forward is the fencing around Peace Park. So Peace Park has a partial fencing, and we're going to complete the fencing around the park. So that's the application that the town is bringing forward. Then non-for-profit organizations or service clubs can bring forward their own applications. So the arches are coming forward from the Rotary, the Fawn Hill Rotary Club. That's who's bringing forward that application, not the town. And then we also are looking at the Lions, working with the Lions to put an application in for resurfacing the tennis courts at Centennial Park, and working with the Baseball Association to put in the new lights at Centennial Park. So we can only put in one, and what this grant, and Vicki can talk about this a bit more, so it's more for initiatives to bring people out into the community to do activities, to promote healthy activities and be outdoors, especially with the COVID that we're experiencing. And so, the fencing around Peace Park will help us with the Thursday night experience, and the arches with Summerfest. So these are all different activities that people can go outside and do and be healthy during the pandemic.
Thank you. I wasn't aware that the groups were coming in with those applications. I thought that was the town submitting those applications.
Yeah, no, ours was only the Peace Park application was ours.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else, Councilor Hildebrand?
On this subject, no, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Hahn?
The mayor to the treasurer. Then, so we have maxed out our capacity as a town then to apply for that. So we're at the maximum amount that we can afford.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Mayor, with this particular grant, we only have one application we can put in. Yes.
So, and I was wondering too, so I know, I think it was sometime last year, we kiboshed the idea of the WUNRF, but I think we were supposed to have a report or at some point in time, a discussion, I guess, to decide what we were going to do in place of in that area. So I don't know if that is something that's going to be coming back to council or if that was something, because when I saw this initially, that was the first thing that popped into my head was something that in that area around the MCC, because that's going to need to be addressed, especially considering we're going to have those new developments done before too awful long. And there's going to be a lot more pedestrians walking in that area.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, what's tricky about this grant is that there isn't a lot of money available in the Golden Horseshoe. I think it's, what is it, 1.3 million, Vicky? So there isn't. So we were just thinking of a project that one would benefit the community, and we would have a really good case for it. So the Thursday night experience is a really good town experience for the residents. I can't speak about what's happening with the WUNRF. I know it was put on hold, so I don't know if the director of planning can talk about it or the CAO.
Let's go to the director of planning. I'll clarify.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, council did approve in this year's budget the approval of some money to hire a design firm to come up with a design for the WUNRF. So that is something that's supposed to proceed this year. And that, of course, would come back to this council for council's input and then ultimately council's approval.
We have an estimation on what the approximate cost of that consultant fee would be?
I believe it was $20,000 that was approved in the budget. I'd have to go back to the budget to confirm, but it was approved in this year's budget.
But that's not something then treasurer, we can also add in as the consultant fees to decide something down there as well, then is what you're saying. Like put it towards that $20,000 consultant fee.
We can do either or. I mean, it's either the fencing at Peace Park or it would be that. I mean, we can't do both.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. And so just for clarity, and I'll go back to Director of Planning. So we passed $20,000 in the budget to do to see what we were going to do with the area that used to be classified where the WUNRF was going to go. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you, it's to develop a plan and create council's vision for that area. Last April, a report was presented to council with respect to what the vision for that WUNRF area was, and council did not support that vision. And so as a result, we need to determine what your vision is for those lands. And so there was money that was approved in this year's budget to do that work.
Excellent. Okay, thank you for that clarification. Any other item on the agenda? We've had some good discussions here on these items. Councillor Olson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CAO. I heard that a moment ago that we were considering changing the PSR system, and I've been waiting for a report and how we were going to optimize this, the existing system. Has that now been changed, or?
It has not been changed. Council identified this as a strategic action item, and it's a top 10 priority. What didn't exist at the time you approved that, but does exist now, is a grant opportunity to get some professional advice to help us shepherd through to some potentially good outcomes. We will or won't get the grant. If we do get the grant, we're going to rely on some external professional advice and hopefully allow that to help guide us to the best possible decision. If not, then we'll carry on as we were. We certainly appreciate that this is an important item for council, but we have the opportunity for possibly up to $50,000 worth of external help to get us to a really good item. And the more we dig into this, the more we realize, You know, there's a chance to get it. It's pretty easy to come up with something that's nice bells and whistles for the outside world to make it easier to file complaints with us and make requests for service. But to really succeed, it's got to interact with our systems and actually generate work orders in reasonable time and actually create a feedback and a communications loop, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's got to work with, you know, more or less how we're structured as a corporation. So we're really hoping to get some guidance on that. We have an opportunity for possibly free money for expertise to help us. But failing that, we will go back to using what skill and knowledge we do have as a team and get back to what we were talking about. So we're taking a slight detour here in hopes of accessing up to $50,000 worth of outside help.
Thank you, Mr. Theo. Councillor Olson, any other comments?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Any other, I see Councillor Stewart. Councillor Stewart.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm circling back to the arches. It says seeking remaining funding to complete the project. When they came to you about the grant, did they give you any indication of the amount or the percentage of funds they have raised? And my other question along that is, they've come to us a couple of times now, first with the solid blue lamb beams, and then they came back to us with another idea, but there's not been an idea finalized with council yet. So I'm wondering about them getting a grant money for this at this point.
First of all, before I'll go to the to the CAO, please.
If I can, Council, in the time I've been here, we've had two separate, there have been two sort of iterations, neither of which have, for various reasons, been satisfactory. But I would submit to you that fundamentally the problem is that there's not enough money. The town doesn't have skin in the game yet, and so far the community group has not been able to raise enough to be able to construct something that is ultimately satisfactory to council. Accordingly, us endorsing this application may well lead, we don't know, but this is the attempt to get more money on the table so that, in fact, another proposal can come to you, and hopefully there will be enough money so that it can propose something that is acceptable unto you. I think we've been through enough of this that there's sort of a shared understanding of what is and is not good enough. But this is a mechanism to get enough money on the table, and it's simply not there yet. So while all of your points are entirely fair and accurate, this is a good opportunity. It's the community group's application, not the town's. But going forward with this, if we were prepared to at least say, yes, we think this is a good application, it may well help us get over the goal line.
And I see the Director of Finance has a comment to make.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, they have raised at least $90,000 for the arches, and that number that I put in there, the $60,000, that was an estimate at the time when I wrote the report. They're almost ready to finalize their application, and I think they only need about $30,000. So they're only putting in what they need to finish off the arches.
Councillor Stewart?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Again, any other questions or comments or raised on the consent agendas? And I see Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes, one last item on the consent agenda is Niagara Regional Housing Report, 8.5.7. I found it very interesting that there's only two communities that don't have any Niagara Regional Housing developments, and that's what we call affordable housing, and that is Wainfleet and Pelham. We're the only two, which amazed me. The other thing that amazed me is, yes, we do have some people getting rental supplements, but that number went down during the pandemic, the end of the year report. So both numbers were pretty amazing. But I understand, and I think the Director of Planning probably will comment more on it. We talked about this at length too, and the problem we have is, I'm sure, the cost of land. so the Niagara region is probably not going to put a lot of effort in putting in affordable housing in this community. And I'm not sure whether there's any other government support for that that'll help developers build affordable housing. And possibly the Director of Planning can comment on those two issues.
Okay. Director of Planning, comments on that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Niagara Regional Housing is the kind of the housing corporation here in the region that does provide affordable housing. And you can see from their report the distribution of those housing units across the region. Quite frankly, in the past, when we've had some discussions with them about, you know, having some units here in Pelham, you know, there is a need here in Pelham, and it's not to say that there isn't a need, but there is a need. But unfortunately, there's a greater need in other communities, and that's where their focus is. And it's a real problem. And as Councillor Hildebrand indicated, it's very challenging getting affordable housing constructed and built. So the only way that it happens is either through the Niagara Regional Housing Corp or with some other type of nonprofit group that does it. It's generally not something that's done by the developer in the free market. It is usually done through associations with nonprofit groups and organizations.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hildebrand, any other comments?
No, that was very well put. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If no one else, I do have something, a project or a comment that I'd like to have the CAO comment on, and that is the 8.73, the Cannabis Control Committee. I see that, I mean, everyone here on council is very aware of costs and what have you, and I see that now that we have a town solicitor, that the CCC is still going to the rather expensive Toronto lawyer for advice. I realized that when we were into the creating the bylaws and what have you, that maybe it was very specialized advice, but now it just seems a case of going to the Canadian government, Health Canada specifically, and to get some clarification. So I guess my question to you, Mr. CAO, can we as a council direct the CCC to use our town solicitor as opposed to going to the Toronto lawyer? I mean, did we give them a mandate that they could go to that lawyer whenever, or how is that working with them?
Well, so working backwards to the last question, of course, council, you control all ultimate behavior and the modus operandi of all committees and staff while you're at it. So yes, all decisions at the end of the day land on your desk. So that's the short answer. I think the more in-depth or the better answer is that from where I sit and I attend all or virtually all the CCC meetings, you know, I feel like they're sort of at the, you know, maybe the 70th, 75th percentile of the things that council has asked them to do. They're working towards final bylaws. And as I interpret the mandate, I believe it will be coming to an end in a year or less from today's date. So based on the current mandate, the CCC on your behalf has been receiving advice from one source consistently. Right now, staff in the CCC are each working on different elements that may be included in some revisions to the odorous industries bylaw. And though the staff component is in fact being worked on by Ms. Sturton, so she has now started some work on that file. And of course, her rates are far more attractive. But given that, I always sort of advise not to change a horse in mid-race. And although our Toronto Council are not inexpensive, they're also very good. And they've been giving advice on this matter for a while now. So shortly, they won't need to give advice on drafting the bylaws. And I think Ms. Sturton's eminently capable of doing that. But we're coming towards the end of that work. And what's going to be left is the carriage of the legal files that we've appointed to that law firm. So no one knows when the courts are going to be back up again to hearing matters such as these. I have no particular reason to think they're going to get heard in 2021. I couldn't offer you odds on that. But in due course, we do have a number of outstanding cases, 5, I believe. And since they've been retained on those, presumably they will conduct those. Ms. Sturton has taken care of the prosecution, and she is providing advice on some potential licensing aspects. So we are introducing her, and partially because she has a good skill set and partially as an economizing measure. But for the items where the CCC is at the 75th, 80th percentile, I just don't think it would be, notwithstanding the fact that Ms. Sturton has a more competitive rate because of her in-house status, ultimately, I don't think it's beneficial to switch horses mid-race.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, Mr. CAO. I appreciate that. Any other comments on the on the agenda consent items? Oh, I see, Councilor Olson.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to speak about the Mayor's Youth Advisory and the Seniors Advisory Committees, both of them. Because in the first place, I'm looking at them, and there's a need for, they express a need for outreach for mental health reasons and for contact with within the community. And I just wanted to ask, I think we're going to have to be very creative to get people in touch with the services we offer. So I'd like to ask Director Van Ravensway what type of things we can do and try to create a way for folks to be in contact. And I see this happens also with transit and for isolated seniors, and our youth are telling us that there are mental health issues that they're trying to address. And I think it's important that we develop perhaps a different approach to being in touch with people.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. We will turn to the Director of Recreation, Ms. Van Ravensway.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Councillor Olson, we are going to be looking at, we have identified those particularly 3, the 2 committees as well as transit has come up lately as well with regard to communication and trying to find a way to communicate better, if you would call it, to the youth and the seniors in rural communities. We will be working with the communications officer, as well as we're going to be reaching out. Normally what we can do is we hold forums. We hold forums with the youth through the schools, and they're in person. Right now with COVID, as you know, it is a challenge, and many municipalities are going through the same challenge because we cannot meet. And well, we also go through the schools, and the schools are, they've just returned, and it is extremely difficult. But we will be researching more and also going through our counterparts across the province, through Parks and Recreation Ontario, to find out how they're addressing and hopefully coming up with new ways of adapting to be able to communicate better. As we know, recently it was announced that broadband will be expanding. That may help, although we will still have the issue with seniors and not having internet access. So it is a challenge, and we will be trying to address it throughout the the year with the committees.
Thank you for that, Ms. Director. Councilor Olson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think we can be optimistic about the broadband because I think there's going to be, by next spring, I think we can be assured that there's going to be, that SWIFT program will add another 800 to 1,000 dwellings to the system. I think that will happen. The other thing that I was wondering about was the use of the mails to get our documents into the homes because the voice is not commonly read in a number of places in the community that are not close to distributing points, and there's probably 1,200 homes who don't have access to the voice.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just wondering about the use of the mails for our materials.
Mm-hmm.
Any comment on that? Vice.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, we have had, like over the years, we do circulations through mass circulation through the post office, although at a high cost. So this is something that we can look at, and we may be able to target certain areas of the town to see if we can improve on that.
Councilor Olson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That answered my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There's been so many studies that have shown that the number one complaint of seniors is how to combat the loneliness they suffer day in and day out. So it's paramount that all communities do what we can to reach out to these individuals. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, Madam Clerk. Oh, if I may, one last call, Council. Any other consent agendas that anyone would like to address? Not seen, so Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I'll start the vote with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that motion passes. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to the presentation and consideration of bylaws. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrandt, seconded by Councillor Hahn. Be it resolved that the Council for the Town of Pelham, having given due consideration to the following bylaws, do read a first, second, and third time and do pass same, and that the mayor and clerk be and hereby authorized to sign and seal the bylaws. 1. 4320-2021, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 1136-1987 as amended for lands located at 3 Hurricane Road, north side of Hurricane Road, opposite Chestnut Street, legally described as part of Lot 163, formerly Township of Thorold, now in the Town of Pelham. The zoning bylaw amendment rezones the lands from Residential 1 R1 zone to the following site-specific zones: Residential 1-302 R1-302, Residential 1 303 R1-303. This is AJDS Properties Ltd, file number AM 09-2020, and number 2, which would be for bylaw 4326-2021, being a bylaw to appoint David Christensen as a building inspector for the corporation of the Town of Pelham. Looking to see if there's any discussion on the bylaws.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Any discussion? And I see Councillor Hildebrandt.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to divide and separate for special consideration bylaw 4320 from 4326.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn to the clerk. Clerk, is this possible, I believe?
Thank you. Yes, it is just a request to divide. So certainly, I don't know if the councillor wished to speak on the topic before we call for the vote.
Councillor Hildebrandt?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I would like to speak on the topic because I've read the detailed bylaw, and I just want to make sure with the Director of Planning that the bylaw reflects the contents of the February the 16th request by the developer, because there was a lot of things seem to be added, and I know there's one correction that had to be made. Because we're talking about the developer asked specifically for site-specific zoning, which we were fine with. And part 1 and 3 was a minimum lot frontage. And part 4 and 5 had a minimum lot frontage included, as well as part 5 had a second unit, a carriage house provided. Now, when you look at the amendment under section 6, I know the Director of Planning and I discussed that the item there in the second paragraph in the R1-302 zone, that actually was to be, and I think it was a typo error, that is R1-303. And I think Director of Planning will confirm that. But then the bylaw goes on and includes a lot of items with regards to the size of that carriage house. And I just wanted to make sure that in council here, we received confirmation that the developer was satisfied that all those requirements, which basically are second dwelling units requirements, are exactly what he wants for his carriage house, rather than us coming back a second time and going over all those requirements. Because I think we all approve the second carriage house, we all approve the basic concept of the plan, and said it was a good plan. But I just wanted to make sure in council that we had a perfect understanding that what we're approving is what the developer wanted, and nothing more and nothing less. So if the Director of Planning can comment on those issues.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. We'll turn to the Director of Planning, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. As the councillor identified, there was one typo in the bylaw, and so we will correct that and ensure that that is corrected, so that the second dwelling unit permission applies to the area that's being zoned R1-303, and it's only for the carriage house. So the bylaw and this information was shared with the applicant, so he's reviewed it, and he is or they are fine with the restrictions or limitations that are put on the second dwelling unit permission. So they are okay with that and didn't have any comments or objections to what was being provided in the bylaw. And then the other permissions are with respect to the 3 lots that are going to be created at the front, and those are in the R1-302 zone category. And they provide for reduced lot area and lot frontage, and we added a setback from the laneway and made that setback larger than what would be required for an interior laneway, and that was again at the request of the applicant.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hildebrand, any other comments?
No, thank you. That confirms exactly what I believed the other night. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on, I guess we're voting on the first bylaw. Any other questions or comments on that? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, this vote will be in regards to bylaw 4320-2021, which is the bylaw to amend the zoning bylaw. And for the vote, I'll start with Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson. Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
That motion passes. That does bring us to bylaw 4323. Was there any discussion from council on this bylaw?
I think I would like to ask a question, if I may, of the Director of Planning, or maybe the CEO, whoever is looking at this. Is this a vacancy we've had a while in the building department, or is this a new position being made?
Well, neither really. Mr. Christensen joined us a week after COVID started. We hired him prior to COVID, and I believe he had the indignity of being the first person to come on board after the start of the pandemic, and so didn't get the same sort of welcome and tour around that normally people do on their first days. But he has demonstrated and developed the skills necessary for this to now be possible. And this is a housekeeping item pursuant to the legislation. One can't do the building inspecting duties unless appointed by council of the municipality. So it's a good day for him. Beyond that, I'm not his direct boss. I'm sure Ms. Weens has something positive.
Ms. Weens?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. So yes, this is not a new position. David Christensen is our building intake and zoning technician. But over the course of this past year, he has been taking some courses and has qualified and passed Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing courses with respect to building inspection duties. And so he is able to do some building inspections. And so in order to have him, certainly grow in the position, we'd like to name him as a building inspector so that he can do some inspections when the opportunity arises for him.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions on this one? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. I will begin the vote again with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that carries. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to motions. And item 14.1, we do have a motion put forth by Councillor Hahn, seconded by, my apologies, Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Hahn. Would Councillor Stewart wish to read her motion into the record?
Yes, I can read it. Okay, whereas the Toronto Dominion Bank has notified its customers that they are closing the Fonthill branch July 16th, 2021. And whereas Council believes that the Toronto Dominion Bank has not taken into full consideration the fact that Pelham is a fast-growing municipality with many current and future residents depending on their in-person financial services. And whereas the town of Pelham has a large and growing senior population who will be seriously impacted by this closure. And whereas a trip to a neighboring city to a bank that is already overly busy is unacceptable. And whereas many residents of the town of Pelham are not tech savvy enough or do not have suitable access for internet banking. Now, therefore, Council for the town of Pelham asks that the Toronto Dominion Bank seriously take into account these concerns and reconsider the closure of the Fonthill branch.
Looking for discussion?
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, so any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the vote, I would start with Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that carries.
Very good. A unanimous vote. Excellent.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to the confirming bylaw, and I have a motion put forth by Councillor Kaur, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that the following bylaw be read a first, second, and third time and passed, being bylaw number 4329-2021, to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of Council of the Town of Pelham at its regular meeting held on the first day of March 2021. If there's no discussion, I'd call for the vote with Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that motion carries. Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is 7:20, and I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Hahn. Be it resolved that this regular meeting of council be adjourned until the next regular scheduled meeting for March 22nd, 2021 at 5:30. If there's discussion?
Not seeing any?
Seeing none, I'll start the vote with Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart. Sorry, Councillor Stewart, you're muted.
Sorry, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt. My apologies, Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, you may gavel out the meeting.
This meeting is adjourned. Good night, everyone.
Good night, all.
You all.